And welcome back, friends. Good to be with you again. This is Richard, and we're here with Dr. Gabriel Cousens, who's got some things to say, observations about the change in consciousness on the planet that's manifesting, and with exposure of global fraud on a scale that has never come to light even close. So it should be a really interesting exposure, and we'll see where it goes. Welcome, Dr. Cousens. Thanks for being here.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Doug. Doug's behind the scenes, and we dialogue, but I started off. So we're going to take a look at just what Richard's saying, what's going on. So, but first we're going to do dance to get the spiritual joy going, which is really important to do. And so we don't feel like we're being we don't want this to affect us and to weaken us and to weaken our heart and our mind. Okay, so when we dance, we get clear a little bit of the truth of who we are. And that is indestructible. Okay, so let's dance for a few minutes, and I encourage everyone to dance. Okay. And now we'll meditate for a minute or two and get into our discussion. So focus my eyes. If you don't have a mantra, this is a mantra. The name of God that Moses got at the burning bush, and the name that Jesus gave to his disciples when he came down from Mount Meron. It's Yoda in the in-breath, Hey in the out-breath, Wa in the in-breath, Hey in the out-breath. That's it. So let's just focus, feel the energy. Okay, so come on out of meditation, and we'll start really with something that maybe wasn't as clear last week, which is the good wolf, bad wolf story. In my Native American tradition, Sitting Bull used to tell this story. He was a very wise person, and people would come for advice. And he said, learn to listen to the good wolf. People, what are you talking about? Well, we have two wolves that are speaking to us. One's a negative energy wolf, and one's a good energy wolf. And as you develop as a warrior, it's very important to listen to the good energy wolf because it will guide you to a higher understanding of things, and you'll bring goodness to the world. So that's that story. Now, in today's world, same thing. What Richard was referring to, however, is we thought there was a good energy wolf out there telling us what's going on, when it turns out that it was a negative energy wolf, a wolf that lies, a wolf that deceives. And that's what we're seeing. Now, it isn't about Trump and his people who are uncovering all this, but it is about, I don't know, last 30 years, 40 years, 50 years of deception. Now, Trump was not the first one to get this. I mean, JFK, who was assassinated because he was said if he was exposing the CIA, he was getting ready to, and they assassinated him. And also his brother. And also Martin Luther King, because he again speaking out against the war. But the point is, there was deception. Now we're seeing, wow, there's worldwide deception. Our tax monies from the U.S. are not going to where they're saying they're going. Now, it's kind of interesting. People are pretty upset here in Israel about that because it turns out that a lot of the anti-Netanyahu demonstrations were explicitly financed by U.S. aid. Explicitly financed to another cover organization, the Blue and White organization. And so when it was time to kind of create justice and get the Supreme Court in order to the next step of order, these paid demonstrators were there. And then after that, then we have bring the hostages home, the same group. Now, let me explain. When Sinwar was one of 1,000 hostages that got released for one guy called Shalit, okay, what was the result? A lot of people with Sinwar then come back years later, not that much later, and create a massacre of 120 people. So they saved one person, Shalit, and the result is 1,200 people got died. So there is a significant amount of people who get that the hostages, however, are alive now. If you're returning them in return, you're giving away the, possibly another 5,000 people being killed because you have people who are convicted murderers. It's confusing. But that money was from USA Today was given to finance these, quote, local protests, which weren't local protests. That's well documented. That's come out. And Hamas, on the other hand, got a lot of cement contractors, or one main cement contractor, what did he do with that cement? It's called building tunnels underneath. So that's just an example. I just want to make a point that it's like great fraud. And then there's just one list after another. And but to me, what's important is not to focus on the details of the lie or how they've used the money to do their political manipulations, which is what we're talking about. But what I'm saying is those are the bigger issues that are going on that are being exposed, by Trump and his team. And it's like pretty courageous to be doing that because other people have tried it and have been assassinated. So that's our status. So it's a good wolf, bad wolf. But what we have is a wolf in sheep's clothing, another kind of wolf, who looks like they're doing good when they're doing bad. So it's very difficult to discern, is it a good wolf, bad wolf, or a wolf in sheep's clothing? So this is what all of us are facing today as we look at what's going on in the United States, but really in many places around the world. And, there's some politics with that because you have the Democrats being very upset he's not funding USA Today. And what's going to happen when Trump goes after the Pentagon? And it's like such corruption. It's like kind of almost beyond our comprehension. I mean, how do you, billions of dollars, maybe trillions? It's like, wow. So we are talking about the good wolf, bad wolf, and the wolf in sheep's clothing. Richard, you may want to have some things to say.
One of the things you mentioned, the funding from the U.S. and from these intergroups and from USAID and how it was going to fund Hamas. Well, it's also going to fund Israel's military as well, billions of dollars from American taxpayers for the bombs that Israel uses on Gaza and for what Hamas uses against Israel. And the pattern is to fund both sides of conflicts and to skim off massive money and to create chaos at the same time. So I think there are multiple objectives being achieved.
Right. I'm going to interrupt for a second. I think what I'm seeing when I look at the Middle East, at least, is a concerted effort by the U.S. to kind of keep the status quo, not let people win or lose. Let's just keep this status quo. And what's happening is people have said, no, that's not going to work anymore. And Trump is saying it's not going to work. But there's this effort with the status quo, fund both sides, and we go on and on. It's like a setup.
And one of the big centers of the corruption has been in the U.S., all these agencies that they're exposing now. And this is the first time that somebody has brought in a team that can move fast enough to uncover it, to outpace the resistance. And what's coming out is amazing. It's not just both sides of wars. It's all kinds of social degeneration as well. And it's really incredible at this point.
Yeah, money for transgender movies and plays, and it's impressive.
Yeah.
How this money has been misused for public trust.
All the LGBTQP stuff that's going on around the world, it turns out not to be spontaneous. It's funded and planned.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And just like we have these protests about this or that, they're actually externally funded. We kind of knew that was going on in Israel because people said they were getting paid to show up at the demonstrations. But this made it really clear. And it's worldwide. That's the thing.
The only reason that it's still going on is it's moving too fast to stop.
Right.
So how far it'll get is the question, because they've exposed USAID funding all kinds of horrible projects around the world, but now they're going into the bigger ones, and it's going to be interesting to see how far they go.
And I think the issue is we as the public have to somehow take this seriously. The problem is, how do you actually get the information? They weren't even letting Dodge get some of the information. You know, the judge is giving an order, you can't look at the books. It's like, what?
Yeah, they're desperate to keep it hidden. But I think it's too late.
It's too late. It's not going to work. But what I'm trying to say is, what's our spiritual responsibility with this? These are, questions that need to be asked. What is our spiritual responsibility? How much do we, see, the trouble is none of it's really conspiracy. That's the problem. And actually, a lot of things have turned out to be true. But how do we keep the pressure on to make things go straight so that we can kind of enter, that 1,000 years of peace? This is a very, very important spiritual time. And it's very important we don't get seduced into kind of like, well, they're taking care of it for us. Now, there's something that has to happen here. It's got to be worldwide. I'll put it that way.
Right.
And I think it's happening. But you look at England, for example, people, there's this grooming thing with the Pakistanis and the young white girls and how they're passed around and they're groomed. And you have all the politicians pretending it's not happening. If somebody brings it up, they get put in jail. This is a serious type of thing that's going on. For whatever reason that politics is happening, it's like when Tommy Robinson speaking up against it, he's in jail. So, again, that's an example of the worldwide level of corruption. And all the sex trafficking is all part of the same game. Whatever it is that's going on with people, their need for more and more money and control and power over people, we have to kind of create a new moral ethic in some way.
Yeah, it was really brilliant to go after the money streams because that exposes everything.
Yeah. But the real streams, that we need to go after is the flow of consciousness that allows that to happen.
Right. And that takes us back to the same message that you're talking about every week with the world peace meditation and
right.
That whole theme.
So, it's the more people we have meditating for world peace, we only need 9,000. We're not going to do that. We can have the power literally to shift the global mind.
Right.
And that's really the battle that we're talking about. These examples are a wake-up call to see how far we are away from the global mind of peace and oneness. So it's like, okay, let's take this seriously. Let's really listen to what's going on. Better than listen, better than expose. Act on it to prevent it from more happening. And I think that's what Trump is doing, which is really good. And that's why a lot of people are leaving or being asked to leave. because they're corrupted. They're already corrupted. And he's making a really wise move to pay people to quit. That was pretty good. But the challenge is for us, how do we see the wolf in sheep's clothing? How do we learn not to listen to the bad wolf thinking it's the good wolf? How do we discern what the good wolf is? These are really difficult questions as we see happening right in front of us. It's not easy. It's easy once it's exposed, but it's not easy before that.
Why don't you give an example of what you're referring to, Gabriel?
Well, let's say what we saw was Hamas getting funded to, cement to build structures, but it all went into tunnels, as a way of making a military complex to attack Israel. That's clearly a wolf in sheep's clothing. Okay? I can't speak exactly the details of Ukraine, but I think there's somewhat of that going on there as well. So it's it's like that.
Yeah. The funding of Ukraine has always been a bad wolf situation from the U.S., as far as I can see.
That's always been a what?
It's always been a bad wolf situation from the U.S.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly my point. And it's like, whoa. And then we have politicians, mostly Democrat politicians, unfortunately, who are thinking there's some kind of, let's shut down Congress so they can't, go after these records to expose the massive demoralizing corruption and straighten it out. And then he's going to release the records for Kennedy assassination. Now, LBJ on his deathbed did say he gave the okay for Kennedy's assassination. He did say that. But now it's going to come out in bigger pictures.
Right.
So, and what newspapers do we listen to? And what radio and TV stations do we listen to? Who's been giving us, some level of accuracy? Now, truth doesn't mean you got a perfect, get everything right. It's kind of a general, overall interpretation, and it gets moved this way and that way, but it's a general frame of reference. What media is giving us that versus the standard media, which is deliberately misleading us. When I mean deliberate, it's deliberate, as far as I can tell. But we have all these questions, how do we form an opinion? It's not so easy. But this becomes a crisis in that way.
How do you form an opinion on stuff like what? What do you refer to?
Everything. How do you form an opinion on what's happening in the United States? How do you form an opinion on what's happening in Ukraine and Russia? How do you get clear, when in England they're pretending this, abuse of girls isn't happening. And anyone that brings it up, even on the internet, gets basically called in by the police. So what I'm saying is, how do you get clear who's telling the truth and who isn't, or who's close to telling the truth? People exaggerate, this goes on, but that's not the same thing as getting kind of a general feeling for the truth. You see what I'm saying here?
I'm trying to follow it.
So the general media expresses and says things in a way that gives you a wrong understanding. We call it a meta-communication, the communication behind the communication. So, and we get a wrong impression. So they're deliberately misleading by what they say, but also how they say it.
Right. And apparently they're well paid to do that.
Correct. That's what I'm saying, because again, we're looking at U.S. aid, apparently was involved in paying a lot of these corporate medias. Okay? That's also come up. So they're being paid off, and our job is, how do we distinguish, what seems to be close to the truth, even though it may be not perfectly accurate, but the overall diagnosis insight is pretty much on track, not conspiracy. Is that making sense now?
Yeah, most of what the major media is doing is all planned deception.
Correct. Versus, well, I got it mostly right. It wasn't 100% right, but I got the general trend of what's going on. That's not planned deception. It's an effort to get at it with limited facts.
And now a lot of details are coming out quickly.
Right. And those details are supporting, I mentioned Alex Jones, he's considered a conspiracy theorist, but a lot of things he's talking about have been accurate. And now as it comes out, even more accurate. And General Flynn, another person. So that's what I'm trying to say, is how do we begin to sort out the trend, the truthful trend of information, because we're trying to orient our lives, and these are affecting our lives. Now, ultimately, there's only God and Zoloto, and the ultimate focus is on God. But God is giving us the challenge to be able to sort out what's going on.
Right. And how to focus on God is not so clear, because remember that both sides of most military conflicts think that they're doing what God wants.
Right, but they're
While
not
they kill each other.
They're not necessarily doing, you have to meditate, you have to have a daily thing. There are some very religious people in the military. Okay, and
I'm differentiating between religious and God-oriented people.
Yeah,
They're not identical.
I agree.
Because mass bombers are typically very religious.
Right. So all that makes it really hard. That's exactly the point I'm saying, is how do you do that? And that requires some real reflection and meditation and associating with people who are also spiritually focused and giving you a reflection. So you have your inner experience of meditation, your kind of your immediate feedback, your feedback from your teachers, and your feedback from your peers. And all those begin to put things more in order.
Right.
And so we need all levels of that feedback to even get close to what's going on.
And one important factor is that any real religious teacher or spiritual teacher is going to refer you back to your own inner silence and your own inner guidance, and not a rote obedience to whatever they say.
Right. And what I'm saying is there's a danger of being deluded even yourself, and that's why the support feedback of your peers who are spiritually oriented is very important, and of leaders. They're all important feedback systems.
Right.
And, so I wouldn't disregard a leader, but that's not the only thing that goes on. You have to have the inner experience, and then the other things validate that or affect the inner experience.
Yeah. No, real spiritual leaders are inspiring and valuable and rare. I've noticed that if you come across somebody that's spiritually connected, they're aware on many levels. And
Right,
on the internet, there are spiritual leaders that are telling people how to live.
right,
They're clearly out of touch.
right.
The ones that are not are different.
That's why it's good that Trump has kind of given up this mandatory vaccine thing. I think he was wrong.
Yeah, that's one of the weak points, is that they're trying to get him to go along with the next pandemic.
Well, I don't think he will, because the pandemics are aimed at disrupting what he's doing.
He's got good people around him to help him not fall for it.
Right. So all that makes it hard, and people put him down because he didn't get it right. Well, hey, he's not a medical person. It's a little confusing. Fauci was considered the expert, and was giving a very clear advice. It's like, well, you go against all your experts. I mean, but now there's more. He's got to get the right experts at all levels, including the medical. And, they've withdrawn from the World Health Organization, which is a really good move, because it was really going to try to control our health, the health of everybody around the world. And these are great moves. So he's learning what wolf to listen to here, and like us, learning about a wolf in sheep's clothing, like Fauci. So it's pretty good. Obviously people are extremely impressed with him, and his ratings are very, very high, more than 70%. So it's good. But everybody gets taken in, everybody makes mistakes. It's kind of part of the game. And if we just focus on the mistakes, we don't see, the overwhelming good parts. Yeah. That's a very common problem, is people just want to be critical. Whatever they get from being critical, they don't see the big picture.
That's right. Yeah, they reject somebody if they're not perfect.
Right. And that just is unrealistic. So we have all these things that are really wow, and it's exciting, but the challenge is there. And I gave kind of an answer, which is trust your inner self, trust your spiritual collective you've got around you, whatever, and also. I'm going to say trust historical reality and what's been considered correct, and trust your teachers. So that's like 4 points that all have to align. And that's important. Just like the idea of fascism, well, I don't know if it's the right word, where the king is ruling and everybody else is just kind of controlled workers who are just getting by. And in many, many societies throughout the years, throughout the thousands of years, that's been the way it is, a feudal society. And the model of the one world government is about recreating a feudal society with a few people on top and everybody else on the bottom. Oh, and supposedly you'll like it, but nobody really likes it, and there's always rebellion against the feudal leaders. Here, the world is waking up to the attempt at feudalism, and worldwide feudalism, and I believe we'll succeed. I feel very optimistic that this is a great push in that direction.
Right. There are challenges. And, for example, Trump is being pushed into a form of fascism where the government merges with corporations. And I think he's calling it the Sovereign Wealth Fund, right?
I'm not sure because I think that he's also kind of fighting that because this combination, which has been going on for since World War II at least, with President Eisenhower warned against the military-industrial complex, is what he's fighting. So I would say he may be actually fighting against that fascist.
Yeah, remember when he was announcing the Sovereign Wealth Fund and he had these two representatives, I don't remember who they were.
Yeah, and
Terrible idea.
I don't think he's there anymore. You know?
Right.
And learning by experience. Not everybody does that. Not everybody wakes up to the situation. They just become, in a sense, a feudal situation. He's not exactly leading people in that direction. He's saying really wake up and take responsibility, and then you have his vice president also talking, go to the roots, go to the people. So we have that. And, Trump's, I guess he was the only sitting president who's ever attended the Super Bowl. I find that kind of humorous. But again, that's his attempt to connect with the people.
Right.
And I think a good way. Yeah, because that's a very, I'm one of you type things. I think he likes watching the Super Bowl. I don't think he's doing it just for PR, and at the Super Bowl, everybody really cheered. They got it. This guy's with us. He's enjoying our sports. And then
I didn't watch the Super Bowl. What were they presenting during that?
I didn't watch it either, but I'm just saying they announced him and they all applauded for him. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
But then there was what's her name? The very famous singer, who's dating one of the Kansas City people, and they booed her. And she represents that kind of subtle aristocracy. But maybe it's good not to mention her name anyway. So she got booed. That was very interesting because she's dating, one of the all-stars of the Kansas City team. You see what I'm saying? That's huge because the people are able to distinguish between, the wealthy elitist who's kind of doing what she's doing, and she's, again, a pop star, so to speak. Country music getting started. And there's Trump, with his family attending the football game. It's cool. It's cool in that way.
Yeah, he's coming across as a human.
Yeah, and then he's dancing, he does his little jig. And it's like, okay, it makes it very real. I'll put it that way. So that's how it's not feudal. The feudal system, which is what we've had under, the Obama, the last 3 terms, that's more feudal. We don't really have a say. Everything's hidden. Does that make sense what I'm saying now?
I think overall you're saying that what's hidden has been coming out.
Yeah. And the leadership now is not in a feudal kind of position. Whereas before, we were going towards feudalism.
Yeah. No, what's been coming out has been the resources have been kept for a select group of inside criminals.
Yeah.
And what's being exposed is to give it back to the people.
Yes. And deal with the criminals. But that's the key to the feudal system.
Right.
Lording over the people. So it's very exciting. It's very positive. Very positive. It's not negative news. This is super.
Yeah.
And our job is to keep, number one, as you said, we meditate to create a frequency of peace that uplifts all humanity. And we also work locally to support the awakening. So that's why I feel optimistic. So, yeah.
Right. And hopefully the people who are focused on getting into public office and positions of various kinds will take that very seriously for themselves too.
Yes, I think that's what's being said. And the politicians that are, they want to shut down, Congress because they're being exposed. Well, I don't think they'll get voted in next 2 years.
So far, the exposure is happening way too fast.
But that's the case. It's a blocker. It's good. Good. Okay, so this is great news. Our job is, align yourself with the divine, align yourself with your friends who are spiritually inclined, who kind of support it, align with spiritual teachers, and align with what has happened through history so we get a perspective of what's going on. So the truths that emerged over the last thousands of years, those patterns are what we need to understand. So, peace be with you. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Atakuasin. And thank you, Richard. And thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Gabriel. And I think it's extremely important to recognize how positive this is, like you've been saying. The exposure is, people have been saying for a long time, well, it's going to be too much for people to handle. And now it's clear that that's not the case at all. It's actually helpful.
It never was the case. It was all nonsense because it's suppressing.
Right.
That's what's good. And that's why when I'm thinking you and Doug, I'm actually really thinking everyone who attends the show, because our job is to empower you and support this. And your job, as we appreciate, is you're coming and listening to get empowered. It's all part of the story. So thank you, everybody, for listening.
So we're about out of time, but we wish everybody a wonderful week ahead. And be encouraged, because consciousness is rising on the planet and it's manifesting in a change in the physical situation. How far it'll go depends on all of us together. So keep your focus in the best place you can. Love everybody. Unconditional love is the spirit of God above any belief system. And if you live that, you're doing your part to heal the world. So,
and on a worldly level, happy Valentine's Day.
Right. So, love to everybody, and we'll see you next time, and take care.
Yes, thank you, Doug.